What is going on, guys? Welcome to The Reformed Reader, the channel where we review different forms of media through the lens of a Christian who is under the authority of the Scriptures. And today, we're going to be looking at The Shadow of the Gods, or really the entire Bloodsworn trilogy by John Gwynne. Let's start with, what is this book about? When the gods fought, it was a battle so savage they destroyed themselves, leaving nothing but their bones and the broken land of Vigrid in their wake. Now, as whispers of war echo over the fjords and across the plains, fate follows in the footsteps of three warriors: a huntress on a perilous quest, a noblewoman pursuing battle fame, and a thrall seeking retribution among the mercenaries known as the Bloodsworn. All three will change the course of the world as it once more falls under the shadow of the gods. Alright guys, so normally with my reviews, the way that I structure them is I go over the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to be looking at not just The Shadow of the Gods, but the entire trilogy. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but like I said, I am going to be essentially reviewing the entire trilogy. So let's talk about the good. What are some things that I liked about this trilogy? The characters. The characters are fantastic. Now I'm going to keep this, again, as spoiler-free as possible, but there are some real characters in this trilogy to love. John Gwynne is also infamous for getting you to love certain characters, and then he loves to watch you hate what happens to them. So I'm going to talk about a few of the main characters. I'm not going to get into spoilers, but I do want to just sort of give my overall feelings about them. First one being Orca. She is by far my favorite character in this trilogy. I loved her arc. I loved her motivations behind what she was doing. Didn't just seem genuine, they seemed real. This is one of the first trilogies that I started when I got back into reading. So reading a female protagonist, I was honestly a little bit hesitant. I was like, man, I don't know that I'm going to connect as much with this matronly figure in the series, but man, was I wrong. She is by far the coolest and most interesting character to me, in my opinion, in this series. So Orca was fantastic. Varg would be a very close second. Varg is the thrall that was mentioned in the synopsis. So Varg's storyline was compelling. I couldn't wait to get back to Varg's story. Varg and Orca in particular, they dominated my interest level in this trilogy. And then we have Elvar. While I understood her perspective and understood her character and her motivations, I thought she was a good character. I just didn't think that she really lived up to, or she didn't meet the standard that Orca and Varg had set, in my opinion. Elvar's perspective kind of seemed like she was there to keep the plot moving. We had Orca's, we had Varg's perspectives, and theirs was a little more nuanced. And so we had Elvar's. It was sort of the more all-encompassing, like driving the plot forward. So I did like Elvar's character, but it just wasn't as good to me as Orca's or Varg's. So I really love the characters. What else? The world. The world building in this is fantastic. Again, this was a series that I got into when I was kind of new to reading. So the Viking theme really spoke to me. I really wanted to get into it, and he did not disappoint. John Gwynne really knows how to write a setting that pulls you in and keeps you in his world. And there's not really anything in this trilogy that pulls you out of it. So that was excellent. The characters are great. The setting is great. The plot is really interesting. The dialogue was neat. There's a lot in this series to love. Now let's talk about the bad. Now, what I mean by that are things that are in the story that I didn't prefer, maybe some stylistic choices and things like that. What are some things that I personally didn't like? So again, this is preferential. This is entirely subjective, but to each their own. I was not crazy about the POV shifts. There were so many different points of view that you jumped from that I kind of lost track at times. Again, I was new to reading when I picked this up. I'm going to say that probably 1,000 times, but I was pretty new to reading when I picked this up. And so I was not used to a story that changed perspective at all, let alone as much as John Gwynne tends to do in his books. Now, this is the only series that I've read from John Gwynne. I have not yet read The Faithful and the Fallen, but I've heard from friends of mine that there's a lot of POV shifts in there too. But now, as a more seasoned reader, I'm not just okay with that. I enjoy that. I enjoy being able to go from one character to another that really fleshes this world out. However, when you have so many different perspectives and all of the names are Norse, it's kind of hard to keep up at times. You know, you have names like Orca, Elvar, Varg, Bjor, Ulfrir, Sigvat, Grind, Glornir. You have all these Norse names, and it's kind of hard to figure out who you're reading about. You know, a few of the names are a little bit easier, but it just took me a minute. And really, it wasn't so much with the main characters as it is with some of the side characters. For instance, when you get into who the Bloodsworn are, and you start learning about who the different members of this company are, a lot of the names are very similar in nature. Now, I understand that they are Norse inspired, but it was just hard for me to keep track of all of them. Now, I'm not one that makes tabs or anything like that. I just read the book, and I don't want to dissect every single little piece of it. I just really, when I'm reading a book, I just want to know, am I going to enjoy it or not? I don't care as much about the prose and, breaking things down, which I do here for the reviews, but I don't like trying to dissect every chapter. I know some people do. That's not for me. I just want to pick a book up, open it, read it, and then at the end of it say, I liked it or I didn't like it. And then I can explain why. So when I'm trying to keep track of all these names, it was just difficult when you're jumping perspectives and you're not staying with one group of characters, that when you go back to one group or another, and one of our main characters, who I clearly recognize, is talking to a side character, I'm not really sure who that is. And I have to use context clues and things like that to remember who it is that our main characters are speaking to. So that was, it was a little more of a challenge for me. Now, I will say definitely not so much in book 3. So I read books 1 and 2, I think 2 years ago. And then I picked book 3 up just recently. I just finished it as of recording this video. And when I started book 3, it was far easier for me to keep track of who the characters were. But on the flip side, it had been 2 years since I had read book 2. So I had forgotten a lot of our characters, or forgotten what their motivations were and things like that. So it just made it a little more taxing for me as a reader to keep up with that. Really, that was my only complaint. I would say is the quick POV shifts and the names being so similar. I would say probably the only other thing, again, this is a preferential thing, is that some of it seems a little dragged out to me. That's just my opinion. This is not a quick, fast-paced story like your, Dresden Files or things like that. This is a slow burn. Maybe not even. I wouldn't even say a slow burn. Maybe more like a medium burn, because it's not quite as slow as like a Robin Hobb book, but it's close. And so if you're into that, this is probably for you. But overall, I didn't really have a ton of complaints. So now let's talk about the ugly. And what I mean by that is, what are some sins, or what is some sin that is steeped into the work that might keep another Christian from picking this series up? There's a few things, one of which is, this is war, this is battle. And so there's a lot of brutality in these books. And John Gwynne is a master of writing battle scenes. So you really see what's happening. He's pretty descriptive about things. I wouldn't say that when he's describing battle scenes, that he's going overboard, or that he's trying to be grotesque in any way. I just think he's just describing the brutality of war. Another thing is different gods in this series. That's the whole plot of this, is that it is a battle of gods. So these are Norse-inspired gods that come in battle in a human-esque type world. And so for me, that's not a big deal. It's like watching Thor. I know what I'm getting when I put the movie in. I'm not going to be surprised when I'm sitting there watching Thor and go, oh, I didn't know this had false gods in it. No, you obviously know the context there. But some people are averse to that. And so if that's not for you, then this is not the series for you to pick up. Another thing is that sometimes there are a few explicit type scenes. And what I mean by that is they're not entirely descriptive, but there are some fade to black scenes in this series. It's an adult fantasy book, so there are adult themes in here. So just be aware of that. So this is not for a young reader. I would say this isn't even for a young adult reader or a teen reader. This is for an adult reader. If you are pretty well seasoned as a fantasy reader and you like the Viking theme and the big epic battles and the descriptive battle scenes, then you're going to love this. But if you're a Christian who doesn't want any language in their books, doesn't want any type of fade to black, doesn't want any type of false gods, doesn't want any kind of descriptive, kind of grotesque consequences of battle and things like that, this isn't the book series for you. So the question comes down to is, should a Christian read it? Would I recommend this to a Christian? I would. It just depends on who it is that I would recommend it to. This is not for everybody. And if I'm being 100% frank with you, this really wasn't a series for me as much. If you are a Christian who doesn't want anything overly violent, doesn't want adult themes, doesn't want some mild language, doesn't want anything to do with false gods, do not pick this up. This is not for you. Also, I would say if you're not a seasoned reader, and maybe even a seasoned fantasy reader, I would say I would probably start with something else if you're new to reading. But if you're well seasoned, none of these things, like you don't have any personal convictions about these things, I would say, yeah, this may be right up your alley. So if you want an epic battles and epic proportions, this is probably going to be right up your alley. Just, understand going into that there are a lot of POV shifts and things like that. But again, if that's your kind of, if that's what you like, then you're going to really enjoy this series. Personally, for me, I was a little underwhelmed. This series had a lot of hype around it, and so I picked up book 1. I flew through it. I thought it was pretty good. I read through book 2 immediately after. I thought it was better, and I picked up book 3, and I just kind of struggled with it. The battle scenes were really cool. The story seemed to drag just a little bit for me, and one of the things that I'm not crazy about, that Matt over at Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews pointed out, is that while I love these covers, these are some of the coolest fantasy covers that are on the market right now. What I am not crazy about is that these covers are spoilery. What I mean by that is in book 1, we have book 1 here that has the dragon on the front. Book 1, the entire premise is that they're going to go and try to resurrect this dead god. Well, you can clearly see that that's the case. And then book 2, while I think this cover is a lot cooler, it's the same kind of premise. I just don't like covers that give things away. While I love these covers and I think they are really cool, and I think the covers have probably helped skyrocket the sales of these books, I don't like being spoiled from the front cover. But again, should a Christian read this? It entirely depends on you, the reader, on your convictions, on the severity of those convictions, and whether or not you think that you should be entertained by these things. I thought it was pretty good. I just think that this is going to be a series for a very particular type of reader, and those readers are going to love this. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you sticking around for these reviews. Let me know if you read the series, if you liked it, why you did, or if you didn't like it, why you didn't, because I may agree with you on some of these things. And let me know, when should I pick up Malice? Because that's the next one out of John Gwynn's catalog that I plan on picking up very soon. But after reading Fury of the Gods, it kind of made me pump the brakes just a little bit. So let me know what you're reading. Let me know if these sound interesting to you or what books I should review next. So thank you guys again so much for watching. Hope you guys have an awesome week, and I'll see you on the next one.